Well, Ukraine is apparently in mortal danger if it does not receive additional aid. There's been a big controversy in America about this, and Olena Zelenska, who is of course President Zelensky's wife, has been talking about this in an interview to be broadcast tomorrow. Also, the Ukrainian President Zelensky is becoming, apparently, according to the mayor of Kyiv, Vitali Klitschko, the former boxer, he says that Zelensky is becoming an autocrat. He is reshaping Ukraine into an authoritarian state, no different from Russia. He has been, the two men have clashed before, and Klitschko has certainly been critical of Zelensky, but this is quite a big charge, and I want to talk to Mary Dejevsky about it, who is often our guide through complex foreign affairs issues, which she decodes so beautifully and clearly. Mary, you're very, very welcome to the programme. Nice to see you again. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you too.
Klitschko has spoken to Der Spiegel, the German news outlet, and he says, at some point, we will no longer be any different from Russia, where everything depends on the whim of one man. And he is talking about not Vladimir Putin, but Vlodomymyr Zelensky. What's behind these comments, and does he have a point?
Well, you can look at this so many ways. First of all, you're absolutely right to say that there is a sort of rivalry between Klitschko and Zelensky that goes back a long way. Both of them are big characters. Both of them have sort of leadership qualities. And I think it was in some ways a tribute to Zelensky's leadership immediately after the Russian invasion that Klitschko, as mayor of Kyiv, I mean, absolutely crucial position at the time, and still, that it seemed there was a slight hesitation, but he came on board with Zelensky and he accepted that that Ukraine was going to fight and that he was going to be part of that. So that, as it were, was a victory for Zelensky. But as things have gone on, the relations have got sometimes a little bit fraught. But this, I mean, as you point out, I mean, this interview with reference not just to authoritarian tendencies, but to a comparison with Russia, you know, that is what must hit hardest. That's really on a completely different level from anything we've had before. And there are all sorts of reasons for it. I think one of them is there is a feeling that Zelensky is taking decisions by himself, that maybe in the past there was a bit more of a collective or advisory sort of leadership around, whereas that may be less the case now. There's been a big question in Ukraine about whether elections, presidential elections, are due next spring, whether they should be held. And Zelensky and his supporters generally say that they shouldn't, because the law says that you don't hold elections in conditions of martial law. But then there are other people who would maybe critical of Zelensky, who are, as it were, playing the democratic card and saying, well, you shouldn't be postponing elections because Ukraine is a democracy, we're proud of being a democracy, and it's not a good idea to postpone elections. So there are all those things going on. But I would also say, slightly in defense of Zelensky, that Ukraine is at war. There are conditions of martial law, and you have to have one person in command. So, you know, you can look at it like that, or you can look at it and say as Klitschko has said, that Zelensky is looking increasingly at the risk of succumbing to authoritarian tendencies. Yeah.
I have another question for you in a second, but I just want to read out a message that Gaza in Yorkshire has texted in. He says, afternoon, Cardi P. Klitschko is right. The corrupt war in Ukraine started back in 2014 when the dodgy Biden and co deal started. It's sad that thousands of lives have been lost, people have been displaced, and children have gone missing. The Ukraine war's foundations aren't all Russia's fault. I'm sure Kamala Harris, the US Vice President, supports the war in Ukraine for financial gain, but had the cheek last week to criticise Israel for standing up to terrorism. Wasn't it America who created the smoking gun to fight global terror? So that's just the thoughts of one of our listeners, viewers and listeners. Olena Zelenska, the First Lady of Ukraine, is being on the media as well. The big interview, which will be broadcast tomorrow. She is hit out after Republican senators in the US blocked a key aid bill. They were talking about giving about $60 billion of support to Ukraine, roughly £47 million. She says that Ukrainians will be in mortal danger of being left to die if Western countries don't continue their financial support. Just briefly, Mary, what do you make of that?
Well, I think whenever Olenna Zelenska speaks, you have to listen and you have to realize that she is really the strongest weapon in Zelensky's armory, and that things have come to a pretty pass when he decides to deploy his wife making that sort of plea. And her words are incredibly strong words, but against that you have to put the fact that, you know, the US has to decide what to do with its funds.
Of course.
And it exposes the fact that Ukraine, really from the very beginning, but especially now, is completely dependent on Western support for its military effort. If that military support stops, if the financial support stops, then it's very hard to say that the war can actually go on that much longer.
Mary, thank you as always. Mary Dejevsky there, Foreign Affairs columnist. Thank you very much. And if you don't follow Mary on Twitter, please do. She's great. She has lots of interesting thoughts on all sorts of things. She was tweeting this week about the constitutional arrangements between the law lords previously and the Supreme Court, how it works now. She's just someone who has a great intellect and great insight. So she's at Mary Dejevsky on Twitter. I highly recommend you follow her.